Hello. So I have some ideas and thoughts, trying to not waste your time. But about economics, maybe about politics, but I'll go over like the better one first. So trust is very valuable. So just go with thought experiment here. Imagine if you could. Well, I'll just tell you, if you trust someone, it's extremely valuable because it's a fact that there are good people. There's people who would never lie to you. And if you have someone like that, you can just believe everything they say and count on everything they promise. And just that is a crazy thing. Just you can just believe everything they say. Now, how do you become a person like that? Well, like I can tell you that my opinion on who you should vote for president, but you can't just believe me, even if you know that I'm not lying and I might have a fairly informed opinion. You can't just believe me because you have to use your own intelligence to make it that big of a decision. But you can become better than that, I think. You can, you can be a professional and spend, 10-hour shifts 5 days a week on fact checking and write a book. Probably in that position, you'd want to write a book, and give that book to people that has a lot of substance. People will believe it, and if you can prove that you put the effort in and you were already a person that anyone can trust, then you would get a lot of credibility in that zone. But I feel that if you have a relationship with someone, that person would have to know that you put more effort in and experienced most of all of the important parts of what they experienced. If I'm assessing someone, they experienced most of the important parts of what I experienced that caused me to form my opinion, and they experienced more, and I trust them, and I think they're smarter than me. Then why wouldn't I take their opinion, even if it's different from mine? That makes the most sense. But on the other, like if their opinion differs from me very often, I'm probably not going to think that they're very smart. But they have to prove that in other ways. But I feel that if you could be such a person that people just believe and trust, not only in that they're not lying about their own knowledge, but that they have very low assumptions, or they don't assume things, then if someone does not assume things and they're also perfectly moral and trustworthy, then why shouldn't you just copy all of their political perspectives, and if they're smarter than you on average? But someone can be smarter than you at math, but not smarter than you at making good voting decisions. But generally, those correlate. So if someone has to be significantly smarter than you in some field for you to trust their voting decisions, and even then, just being really smart is not enough. You have to do the lowest. You have to know that they have low assumption rates. Now we're at 3 minutes and 40 seconds, so I'm gonna I could talk a little bit more about this, but um, so if just go with this thought experiment for a moment. What if Elon Musk? I don't know what you know, but in my mind, it's possible. Well, actually, I don't know. I really don't know. I would like to investigate and take the time to, but there's certain things that make me very doubtful of it. And if I could dispel those things, then I could be in a position where I say that it's possible that, for example, Elon Musk could be 100% moral and trustworthy. Like in myself, I would hope that I am 100% moral, never lie, never do anything bad to other people, and also have enough intelligence and commitment to that I don't do it on accident either. Don't lie on accident by making assumptions. And if Elon Musk was someone that you just knew was moral, like if you knew him personally, you've known him for 25 years, or since he was a little kid, like you're Elon Musk's mom, and you've seen everything he's gone through, and you've been so close to him your whole life, and someone like that you trust, If that was Elon Musk for you, I don't know if you know something that makes that impossible, but if it was true, that has a lot. That is incredibly, that affects everything you believe about the world. Because you're going to believe whatever he says because you know very well that he's very trustworthy. If you have someone like that in your life, you're basically, they would never lie. So if they're saying something, they believe it for sure. So it has a big impact on what you believe. Now, if that's someone like Elon Musk, if that he was like that, it would be insane. Like all the things, if you had to believe and be on his side with everything and assume that you were on his side, there would be so many implications, even for me, especially for people that hate him. And you just run that thought experiment. I mean, there's certain things, you'd have to make a rationalization for a big list of things, but you can make rationalizations for a lot of things, which I could collect a few of them and then make rationalizations and go over them, but you can do that too, and you can think about this next time you see something that requires that. But yeah, the point is, that's a thought experiment. Like, if this person was someone that was that I so powerfully trusted, that there's no way that they weren't in the right. Like, your son, which is just the sweetest kid ever, literally has never done anything wrong, never lied to you, always been super thoughtful of others, got like convicted of a murder, and he didn't do it. And if he did do it, there's no way it wasn't self-defense. Like, because you know that for certain. He's like, you weren't even just because of your mom, just because you're his mom, but also because like you know him so well and you've seen so much of his life and you're judging him by his actions, not just your relationship and his words. If you knew he was just that good, there's no way he could have not done it. You would do anything, you would dig anywhere, and you'd actually have more insight than most people because you know it didn't happen. Like, you already know. So you're not afraid of digging deep, you know? Like, when you know a mathematical theorem, or when you know something's true and you see other people arguing that it's false, it's just, I know for a fact it's true. And so that I know everything these people are saying, claiming it's false, is just not true. Because I know the truth. Like, if you prove a math theorem, you can prove it 100%. Without a doubt, you can prove it. And then people can argue against it. Like, everything that they're coming up with and everything they're building their arguments off of, is pathetic and wrong. So it gives you it gives you insights that other people that aren't sure just couldn't have because they're not making the same assumptions you are. So it completely changes the way you approach something if you really believe something is true. And you have to take on that mentality. I mean, if you can take on that mentality in a thought experiment, it gives you that power without ever having to actually believe it. It's like, I just want to encapsulate this better, but like, if you believe something is absolutely true and other people are arguing against it, any subtle nuance of their argument, like if something sounds perfectly good from their end, but it leads to the conclusion that it's false, then you know that there's something wrong with that argument, even though it sounds perfectly good. So that gives you a window into how to become enlightened about how that argument functions. And you have to create a rationalization for why that argument can be wrong. And that rationalization becomes a mental tool you can use in the future. So it's forced assumptions. Now you have to be willing to make some. Now, how do you run these? You can't just assume a list of random things and then explore and then be like, oh, well, that didn't work out. Like, that would just take infinite mental energy. But you just take what you think could be possible and you go with it for a little bit. And then you flip and try the opposite. Like, just imagine if Elon Musk was this perfect guy. You'd have to make so many rationalizations. Yeah, I get that. But if you really believed that, it would have huge implications. Absolutely massive implications on how the world works. And like, you know, like, what if so-and-so was literally just evil? Then you'd have to look at everything they say through that lens, it's massive. Okay, that was another 6 minutes, but it's a really big concept. Like, what if you like trusting someone is powerful? Having someone you can trust is an immensely valuable resource. Someone that you can trust changes your life. Just one person that you can trust everything they say, because you can't trust 99% of what you hear. But if you can, it's crazy. So valuable. And you're so lucky to have that. And I want to be that kind of person, but obviously I have to earn it. And you being that person is valuable too. People take your word for stuff. It's crazy. Like, I could talk about heroes another time, but I'll summarize it real quick. We kill our heroes. You know, AWOL Nation, Kill Our Heroes song. Kill your heroes, whatever. But basically what it means is don't have heroes. You know, everyone's flawed. You shouldn't idolize anybody. I think that is messed up. You're not allowed to have heroes. Heroes are important to human psychology. And heroes are more than just being on someone's side. Heroes are an icon and they're important to you. Like, someone could be dead 100 years ago. They were actually secretly a horrible person, but they're a hero to you. They're an inspiration to you, and that's important. So I think we should be allowed to have heroes, but the media wants to make sure we don't. Everyone has this deep character flaw that makes them this despicable person. Everyone. No one is immune to it. You know? Like, everyone that you ever thought was good is just a horrible person. They raped kids. They steal money. They lie all the time. Just like, it just has to be. We're not allowed to have heroes. And I hate that. We can't have, the president of the United, we have President's Day, President of the United States, to celebrate our presidents, because presidents aren't supposed to be politicians. They're supposed to be heroes. We're supposed to elect heroic people and have them lead us. That's the point. Like George Washington, he was a hero. That's why he became president. And if you can't have heroes, you can't have good presidents. And we're not even allowed to look for a hero. We're not allowed to have that mentality because it's just supposedly wrong. Like, you're not allowed to idolize people. I think that's not very good for psychology. It's not very good for politics, not being allowed to idolize people. But overall, we need to be a lot more scrupulous of who they do the crimes. They do crimes, like things that are illegal now. We don't even have to make new laws. If we just enforce the laws we have and, increase transparency, 90% of our corruption would disappear. I mean, we don't have, like, stuff's already illegal that they're doing. We just have to prove it, and someone has to do it. And then there's some laws that could change and things improve, but just enforcing the laws we already have, we just need to be a lot harder on crime. Yeah. The big crimes. We don't even have to make more things illegal. Just have to enforce stuff. And okay, so the second thing I wanted to talk about, it's been 14 minutes now, but a potential system for like capitalism, like an economic system. I like capitalism. Communism can't work because it's a very simple concept why communism can't work. And I don't know why anyone ever even thought it was a good idea, because it was pretty obvious to me right away that it was not a good idea. Because, well, obviously, like, you have a little village and everyone just does the right thing. That's communism. You just have a little village and everyone does the right thing. But you really can't control people. But the concept that dispels communism is basically, if humans were such that we could have 1 billion people live like they're in a little village. Like, communism doesn't work if the people that are running the communist government are corrupt and evil, because you're giving them all resources to manage. And if they're evil, that doesn't go well. And secondly, people have to willingly participate. Otherwise, you're forcing them. And so, in a perfect world, everyone would share and everyone would be a good person. But if we wouldn't even need communism, capitalism would work just fine if communism is even possible. If we lived in a world where people had the genetics that made communism possible, we wouldn't even need communism because capitalism would work great. There'd be no corruption because we would just enforce the laws. We'd enforce the golden rule in morality. Capitalism works fine if you do that. We just don't do it. But, so we don't need communism. If we could do communism, we wouldn't need it. So it just instantly dispels itself. And that concept should just be obvious to you. If it's not, I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of gross, but my economic system proposed. So basically, it's harsh. It's actually really not harsh. But the first concept is that there's no loans. I haven't thought about the taxes part of this. I'm not really a fan of taxes, I'm gonna be honest. But we could do taxing on, because taxes are really hard. I mean, you could think, I want to tax a certain percentage of every transaction, but then people will just try to have fewer transactions in the supply chain and game the system. And is that a good thing? I don't know. You could tax land, but then that creates perverse incentives, and people should just pay for things that they use. And so I think it should be more like a system of licenses. Like in communism, you can either have it be where basically everyone gets free bread, or if you work 40 hours in a week, then you get everything you need. If you don't, then you're not part of the system. So you either work and be productive, and then you earn your I'm a part of the system, and then you get the same benefits everyone else does equally. Even if you didn't quite contribute as much or contribute way more, then you get your card as long as you contribute at least a certain amount. That's one system of communism. The other one is just everyone gets free shit, no matter even if they're complete degenerate parasite. That's the other version, which is not the best, which is obviously is way worse than just if you're participating in society, then you deserve to be able to survive comfortably, or pretty comfortably. Right? But if you're not participating, you don't get that right. That's the good version of communism. It's really, really hard to do because it requires a crazy amount of information. But 1 second. So yeah, I'm thinking if you want to drive on the road, you're not entitled to go anywhere you want, I suppose. If you drive on the road with a car, you need a driver's license, and that license could be expensive, Or if you want to, it makes, because the burden should be higher on businesses because they have all the money, right? I mean, big corporations have way more money, and people that make a ton of money, they should pay a larger share, right? That's not really how it works because, when you rent out a property, you know who pays for everything? The renter. They pay for the property tax, they pay for the repairs, they pay for the garbage, whether or not it's separate or whether or not it's included or separate, they pay for it. And same thing with taxes, whether or not it's the rich or the poor paying for it, it's included. It's priced in. It matters not so much where in the supply chain it comes from, but why it comes from there, or why it comes, or when it does come, how much is it, and why is it that much? Not where it comes from is the important part. I mean, you can tax and incentivize things, but I think capitalism is the best way to determine what deserves to exist. So we want to not mess with the free market. Well, besides indirect things. Well, I'm getting really off topic here. But the first taxes things, basically you pay for stuff, And things would be really expensive, like a healthcare card. You get a healthcare card, all healthcare is free, right? But it costs like 400 bucks, 500, 600 a month or something, like in today's dollars. But everyone's wages would be way higher because they simply have to be. No one could afford to live if their wages were lower. And big companies have really no taxes, so they can afford it too, right? But it comes from people's choices. So you get your medical insurance card and you just free medical, right? If you use it. But there's one issue with that. Do I just wait 20 years and, you know, don't have a problem? So why should I buy a card? And then the moment I think I might be getting sick, I get a card, and then a month later, I spend a bunch of money on it, right? That's the one issue I can't reconcile. And that's true of insurance. And that's why we have open enrollment periods and not just buy insurance when you need it. So even then, I don't like the idea. Taxes work well for that. Giving the money to someone. I mean, why do we do taxes? Because people are stupid. That's literally the only reason. If people weren't stupid, they would just pay for stuff that they need, right? Like, why people don't want to pay for roads because they're stupid, right? They would spend all their money on freaking Monster energy drinks and Netflix, and we'd be living in feudal times because society wouldn't operate. But you get some taxes and you go, like, who's going to donate to build a power plant? If they were smart, right? But you basically got to force people to donate to build a power plant and to subsidize things that society wants and needs. But if people weren't stupid, you wouldn't need to do that. People would just say, yeah, that's a good idea, I'm going to donate. And they would do their own due diligence and donate to these, community groups that build infrastructure. It would just be like taxes, except there's like 5 different governments and you choose the one that you like the most, and they are working somewhat separately from the other ones. So, the states should have all the power so that you can move to the state that's the best state. But they're all pretty much the same because they'll fall prey to the same corruption. They're very not really the same, they're quite different. But I think the states should have most of the power and there shouldn't be much of a federal government except for the military. Because, I mean, like, the average person isn't really war minded. They're not going to pay a lot for the military. Do you pay for your parks and recreation pass when you get your driver's license? I don't. Do I donate $5 to charity when I pay for my car tabs? No. I opt out both, and maybe I'm stupid for that. But if that gets extended to everything else, so taxes only exist to make up for human stupidity. But the issue is there's no transparency. I believe the government, every single fucking cent that the government spends should be 100% public. The names of everyone, there should be someone who owns the account, and the account should be completely public, including the owner and everyone that it does a transaction with. Simple as that. And then we could have a democracy. Until that, we cannot have a democracy. Every single cent that comes out of the government should be public. I don't give a fuck about your national security. But the other idea I was thinking about, oh my gosh, 24 minutes, that's crazy. But the taxes thing, I don't like taxes. I think you should have licenses, but maybe not. But another idea is that maybe the license thing would work, but let's say the license thing works, but it only, it doesn't cost that much, but it only kicks in on like a lot on a certain account, and the account has to get to like $100,000 before it actually kicks in. And there would be like spare accounts that only got to like 90,000, and they would like redistribute that money over all the spare accounts that didn't get to 100,000, and give out those spare accounts to new people, like immigrants or people that had a very low account inherited from their parents. And so, yeah, it has to get up to $100,000, but most of them are like 90% filled anyway because of all the money that gets paid out. So you really want to do like up to 10 grand or something, like something like that. But the issue is, it would be really hard for an immigrant because let's say that's not the case and they only get like, they would have to work for a long time and then they get sick and they just don't have health insurance. They don't, they can't afford the driver's license, so they can't drive. Like, it would suck ass for an immigrant because you couldn't do anything. Because you wouldn't have any licenses because they weren't kicked in yet. Because you have to pay them for like 40 years before they kick in. And you better got lucky and inherit it from your parents, And that's the way it works, In real life, without a huge system to back you up, you gotta accumulate those resources and save them yourself. No one's gonna, you can't just pay $100 and then suddenly this huge pile of resources is accessible to you. That only works in a massive society with millions of people. In the real world, without this invisible behemoth government, if you weren't saving up for winter, you're shit out of luck. I feel like that the real world thing is kind of important to not take for granted. So it would solve the immigrant problem, the illegal immigrant problem. I mean, the illegal immigrant problem should solve itself, because if you're an illegal, you don't have human rights, and not having human rights sucks. So they just shouldn't want to become an illegal. But we were very, very nice to them, and we gave them a lot of free stuff. So that's why they wanted to come here. And also, the CIA knows about the cartels. We should have obliterated the cartels 40 years ago. They should all be, they shouldn't exist whatsoever. Cartels, yeah. Perfectly within our power to have obliterated them, but we just don't. We just need to enforce the fucking laws that we already have, and the world will be great. Yeah. But I don't think people should be paid wages. I think you should be paid in shares. So like, you're gonna work for like 5 years, and you're gonna make jack shit for money, and you're gonna have to survive on your parents. And if your parents weren't there to support you, well, you're shit out of luck. And let me tell you, buddy. Let me tell you. People would get their shit together. There'd be a lot of suffering, and then people would have to get their shit together. That's the way it was back in the day. Before you had massive, huge governments that gave everybody free stuff. I mean, if you didn't inherit a lot of stuff from your parents, it's going to be really hard for you. So I think people, there should be, okay, yeah. So here's the fundamental part of the economic system. So basically, you get paid in partial ownership of the company by the company issuing new shares proportional to the value you've brought to the company. And over time, you will accumulate a lot of shares, and you'll be raking in the dough after like 30, 40 years. And you can redistribute that ownership into other companies, so you don't, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. And that's the way it should be. I mean, that aligns with reality. But I think another aspect of that, there should be zero interest loans from the government. So I don't think the government should pay for a lot, but they should provide loans for zero interest up to like $10,000. And or like 100,000. And if, actually, you start at 500, start at 500. If and only if, well, yeah, you should do like 1 year's wage. Now, like 6 months' wage. I don't know. But yeah, but the idea is, we could pay someone some money and then some ownership. But the money would be like just barely enough to get by after you've been working there for 6 months. So the first 6 months, it's not even enough cash to get by. But the government should provide you 6 months worth of free money with zero interest. And if you pay it back, if and only if you pay it back completely, down to the last cent, you are now eligible for a loan of quadruple the size. And this is exactly the same situation as before. So let's say, yeah, you're eligible for a $20,000 loan from the government for free just for being born in the US. And you could just go up, like, I want my loan. And then they give you 20 grand. Boom. You don't have to pay it back, technically. There's no interest. You don't go to jail for not paying it back. But you can't get loans because interest is illegal in my world. That's the only loan you're ever going to get in your life, so you better make the most of it. And if you pay it back every single cent, now you're eligible for an 80 grand loan. Pretty good deal. And if you pay that one back every single cent, you're now eligible for like a $200,000 loan. And that this one is not, you don't inherit this one from your parents. You inherit the licenses, the accounts on the licenses, but you don't inherit this one. And you can inherit their shares in companies. That's how like 99% of people will survive. But for the 1% of people that their parents abandon them, they'll have to do the loan thing, work hard for 6 months, and there will still be charity. But in this harsh society, it's harsh, but it's also very rewarding if you do well. It would be optimal because it's tangled to reality, and it would be optimal for human evolution. It would be very hard on people that are parasites. Parasites would not last a day. They wouldn't last more than 6 months. But you can make bank if you just work for a company and build it up, and you should have ownership in that company. And as an owner in that company, you could make any proposition you want, and it would only get striked down. Let's say you have like 10,000 voting shares. Every share is a voting share. You can do anything in the company by proposing it with your 10,000 votes, and it would only ever get striked down if there was 40,000 against it. Or like, obviously if you have 10,000 votes, but there's like 3 trillion shares out there, we have to basically give you, there's a very small, the chance that your vote's actually going to pass if everyone had to vote on it is less than 10%. But like, as 10,000, we'll just take like the average and assume that there's a statistically significant chance that it would pass at a certain, like, I'll just give you some numbers, like 10,000 voting shares, and then you take in like 100,000 more votes, and only 10,000 of those are yes and the rest are no, then it's likely you've taken a decent average, and it doesn't seem likely that it's going to pass if we expand it to more votes. And so you'd basically put out a vote, it would get distributed to random people that have shares, that have a similar amount of shares, and they would vote with their shares, and it would give like a random sampling. And every day you'd probably have like 2 or 3 of these things come up, and you'd say no, yes, like it would have to be on your phone for it to be efficient. But a lot of these get stricken down before even 5% of the people that own shares, or less than 1% of the people that own shares. If you have a ton of employees like Walmart, maybe only 0.1% of people would ever see your propositions, because if they were bad, they would get struck down quickly. And if you make them way too long, they would get struck down very quickly because no one would want to read them. And if people are just going to say yes to things they haven't read. And so that would basically solve the everything problem about corruption and owning capital. The only downside is that it'd be really hard for someone that doesn't inherit a revenue. But the reason you don't have these shares forever, because they get diluted over time. So, if you work for 40 years, then 40 years from then, there'd be like a lot more shares issued. You'd get diluted down to like half a year's worth. So you'd make bank for a little while, and then because they just keep issuing more shares, like they don't delete the old ones unless your effective voting gets below 1, they don't get deleted. But if your effective voting gets below 1, then you get deleted from the pool. You're below 1 vote. So so if you accumulated like 100,000 shares, then by the time your kids are 40, yours is only effectively worth, it's still 100,000 shares, but it's like effectively worth nothing. Or, if it's like worth less than if everyone, or, you could pretty much figure out, at some point you have to remove people you can't hold, if 100,000 shares is effectively worth less than one when you bought it, then you get booted out. So it'd have to be diluted 100,000 times over. So you'd have it for a long time, but not indefinitely. And it would diminish quickly at first and then slower and slower. It's exponential decay. So yeah, I mean, you could work at a company for 2 years, you'd still be making piss money because maybe you have 10,000 shares at this point, but it's piss money because, but after 10 years, you'll be making good wage. After 40 years, you're raking in that freaking dough. You have strong voting power in the company just for working there for 40 years. And I think that's the way it should be. And then when you have kids, their kids inherit that stuff. And that's the way it should be. And licenses and all that, whatever. I think that'd be a pretty good system. And then once we transition into post scarcity, people stop working, so new shares are no longer issued. And because no shares are no longer issued, your share is no longer diluted. So in the post scarcity world, you're left with a passive income. And if you want to increase your passive income, you can work. And if you don't, if it's good enough for you, then you don't have to work. And because there's no dilution, your shares will keep going up in value. Society will continue to expand. And, people have parents, mothers, and fathers. You will inherit half from your mom and half from your dad. And if people have on average 2 kids, it'd be hard to have a lot of kids in that world unless you were very productive. You could have 2. But if you had 3, your kids might have to work to survive. They wouldn't inherit enough shares. But it's a pretty good deal, I think, because it kind of that's just the way the world works. We're just making it formalized. That one downside is that early on it's very tough. But I think that's small price to pay for the huge benefits it has, because it would work. Like, there's no question about it. For the people that inherit enough to survive, it would work very well for them. And that's about 95% of the population. I'm going to make a guess here to say it would increase to 99.9% as human genetics improve, because this portion of people that would not be able to feed themselves whatsoever because they are in a good position. But that's my ideas. Some ideas I had. I think I covered everything. Oh yeah, no interest. People get paid in shares. Shares get diluted. No taxes, only licenses. And trustworthiness. Yeah, I covered everything in 39 minutes. Poison.